tension is rising in the East China Sea after China announced the establishment of its air defense identification zone there. The U.S. and Japan issued strong statements of concern over the issue, and on Tuesday, the United States confirmed that it flew 2 B-52 bombers over China's newly established air defense zone, as well as the disputed Diaoyu Islands. U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki on Tuesday expressed U.S. concern over the issue. When asked about whether the United States' action should be viewed as counter-provocation, Psaki refused to comment.
We have made this case to China. Assistant Secretary Russell raised U.S. concerns with the ambassador on November 23rd. Ambassador Locke also reiterated our concerns in Beijing, and we have urged the Chinese to exercise caution and restraint. We're also consulting with Japan and other affected parties throughout the region.
These flights were absolutely necessary. They shouldn't be viewed as a counter-provocation.
Again, I don't have any specific comment on them. The Department of Defense has commented on them, and obviously we'll look more closely at actions as they continue.
According to the Pentagon, the planes followed normal procedures and were unarmed. The flight was part of a regular exercise in the area. Both planes returned to Guam. So far, there is no response from China. Now let's take a look at the China Air Defense Identification Zone. It was established on Saturday. According to a statement from the Defense Ministry, all aircraft flying in the zone must report their flight plans to China's Foreign Ministry and the Civil Aviation Administration. If an aircraft does not supply its flight plan, China's Air Force will take emergency defensive measures in response. The U.S. had previously said it would not abide by the Chinese-imposed zone. Japan has also set its own air defense identification zone, which is in the area framed by the blue line there. The disputed Diaoyu Islands is located in the overlapping area. Many countries in the region have reacted to the establishment of China's East China Sea Air Defense Identification Zone. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Qin Gong explained why such a decision was necessary.
The Chinese ambassador to Australia has clearly explained to Australia's Foreign Ministry about the purpose of setting up the East China Sea Air Defense Identification Zone and the stand of the Chinese government. We hope the Australian government would understand this decision correctly and join China in maintaining the aviation safety in the area. And hopefully, Australia will play a more active role in keeping the regional peace and stability.
According to military experts, the setting up of an air defense identification zone won't affect the freedom of other countries' aircraft. Foreign aircraft need only report information such as their nationalities and flight plans and follow other relevant instructions after they enter the zone. The aim is to better locate and identify aircraft in the zone. Since the United States established the first air defense identification zone in 1950, more than 20 countries and regions have set up such zones. Earlier, I spoke with Ben Rhodes. He's an assistant to U.S. President Barack Obama. He's also Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications and Speechwriting. He says the U.S. planes followed normal procedures. Ben, the headlines today read, U.S. flies B-52 aircraft over disputed islands in East China Sea in defiance of Chinese air defense rules. What went into that decision, and why did the United States elect to do so?
Well, it was a long-planned exercise. We do many military exercises in the region, and this is something that was planned many weeks ago. And we said when the Chinese made their announcement that we were going to continue with military operations as usual, and that we saw the Chinese announcement as an escalatory act. We're doing business as usual here, and that's what we're going to continue to do in the region. We'd like to see a de-escalation of these tensions so that there can be a diplomatic process for discussing these disputed territories.
Now, Chinese military experts have rightly pointed out that 20 countries have air defense zones, including America. Why wouldn't you respect the Chinese zone, and why challenge and provoke things between China, since both countries have made so much headway since the Sunnyland Summit in Southern California, where you were at?
Well, again, this began with the Chinese announcement of redefining their air defense zone. We see this as international airspace. That's how it's been recognized in the past. That's how we recognize it today. And so we're going to continue our operations as usual. We're going to talk about this issue with China. And our key point here is that the Chinese move was escalatory. It's time to de-escalate this, respect international airspace, and have a diplomatic discussions and a resolution over these disputed territories.
Ben, we've got a lot of viewers in China, and back in November of 2012, you said, and I'm quoting, engagement with Asia begins and ends with our allies. And a lot of these Chinese viewers, and I want you to have an opportunity to speak to them, they're looking at this and probably saying to themselves, it looks like the United States is taking Japan's side in this dispute about these islands, and therefore does the United States consider China an enemy? So what would you say to them?
No, absolutely not. Of course, our commitment to our allies is very strong. That's rock solid. What we've also said, though, is that we want to have a positive and constructive relationship with China. And in fact, we welcome the peaceful rise of China. We believe that that's good for the United States and good for the region as a whole. So these need not be in competition. It's not a zero-sum game, if you will. And with respect to the disputes between China and Japan, what we've said is, of course, we maintain our commitments to our Japanese ally, but we want to see China and Japan resolve these issues through dialogue. Ultimately, that's the only way you're going to get to a resolution.
But doesn't it look like you're taking Japan's side in this?
No, because this is a new development where you had an announcement out of China redefining this airspace. We just don't recognize that to be the case. In this issue, the United States does have a view, and our view is that this is international airspace. Therefore, if we've had long-planned military exercises that are frankly routine, there's nothing out of the ordinary about these types of flights, we're going to continue with those, and we'll have a dialogue with the Chinese at a political level. We have a military-to-military dialogue with the Chinese as well. And we'll try to work through these issues in a constructive manner that's consistent with the new model of great power relations that the two leaders discussed at Sunnylands.
So you see this as constructive, what's going on? It's not an escalation?
Not on our part. Again, we're doing what we would always have done as it relates to these flights. This is not a new exercise that we developed in response to the Chinese announcement. This is something we had planned for some time. And I think our response to the Chinese announcement came from Secretary Hagel, Secretary Kerry, making clear that we see this as international airspace. That's how we're going to continue to see it. And we'll continue to discuss this issue with China. We believe that we can reduce the tensions through a diplomatic process, even as we carry out our military operations as usual in the region.
Ben, as you know, China was just involved in helping with the talks with Iran. It's also helping to try to get the six-party talks going again with the DPRK. Are you fearful at all that today's action might impact the relationship between these two countries, China and the United States?
No, what we've always said about the relationship between the United States and China is we're going to have differences, but that need not affect the areas where we cooperate. And in fact, that's the very new model of great power relations that President Obama and President Xi discussed. Work together where we can, even as we know we're going to be candid with one another about our differences. And actually, China was part of the process in those P5+1 negotiations of reaching this agreement with the Iranian government to test whether or not we can get a comprehensive resolution on the nuclear issue. Same thing on the Korean Peninsula. We have worked with China to support denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula because that's in our shared interest. We believe that's in the interest of both the United States as well as China. And so that mutual interest, again, is the basis with which we cooperate on Iran and North Korea, even as we're going to have differences on other issues.